So this, when you first open the software, will open to its default screen. That needs to be changed. Its default screen, you scroll to, go to settings, load group. We're going to load settings here. Settings folder, open that. And in the bottom of this row, you'll find a folder IPLMV4 complete dot other stuff. You're going to open that, and then again go back to the settings menu, and now you will see the menu, the pull down looks quite different. You will go to the animal nerve membrane potentials experiment. What that will do is load up both the protocol and the software. The protocol, you should have a printed copy of this. If not, it's accessible here. If you do, let's just close that and get it out of the way. Okay, so for recording, the first thing we're going to do is start this recording before you do anything, and let this record the entire time. What you are going to do is make notes as you proceed throughout your experiment about when you're starting experiments and ending them. And then you will go back with your notes to this recording after the experiments are all done and obtain your data from that recording. So I'm going to start the recording, and what you're going to see is that that red line has suddenly disappeared from the screen. That is recoverable. It is recording, so even if you don't see the red line on your screen, it is collecting data. It just needs to be rescaled. At any time, if you wish to, you can set the scale using this bar here. You see the auto scale will do it for me. Alternatively, you can zoom in if you wish using this button, or you can zoom out. The important thing to remember is that once the traces have begun, they are there even if you don't see them while you're recording. They are being recorded, and they may just be out of the range of the display at that particular time. So in order to do an experiment, I'm actually going to zoom back a little bit, because from experience, this is going to look a little different once I start it. So I've zoomed back, and you can see that recording line is centered about around the middle. It doesn't have to be in the middle. Again, you can always change the scale later if it doesn't look appropriate to you. This back into scale, we're going to use this icon on the far left next to where it says membrane potential. There's a little triangle that I'm going to click, and I'm going to go to scale at the bottom of the menu. Not auto scale, I want to set the scale. So I'm going to tell it exactly what I think are reasonable voltage numbers. I'm going to pick some much larger numbers than they suggest. I'm going to say I'm going to pick about 0.2 and negative 0.2. Okay, let's look at how that looks. So if I scroll back now along the time scale, whoop, you can see it's a little better, but still these readings kind of disappear off the top. Let's see that. You can still see the red lines, but this line disappears off here. So what I need to do is adjust this top number, 0.2, and the negative 0.2 I just set. If I want to see what's up here, I want to reset that scale. So I'm going to reset the scale. Again, set scale. Let's take it up to 0.4. Let's try that. See if that brings everything in. Not quite everything, but we're getting better. So what I'm doing by manipulating this scale on the side is I'm bringing back into the view screen data that I could not see. When you're acquiring data, this same set of rules applies. The software, if it's narrowed on a very narrow range, you won't actually see your data as it's being collected. In order to see it, you have to have the correct voltage potential set on the side. And while the directions for the manufacturer will tell you use the auto scale function, the auto scale, again, only judges based on what it's looking at currently. So in this case, while we've got a huge range, if I use that auto scale function, it'll bring that all nicely into range. In order to record, you will simply push this button in the software to the top right here. You can see reload button. And when you press that, the red line will begin advancing. As I demonstrated earlier, you will take two readings that you will compare to each other. The first reading will be with the electrode placed on top of the cells or along the top of the tissue. And that is what we're looking at right now. That is that baseline. And then what you will do is gently press the electrode into the tissue, and you will see a deflection in the line. See it deflects down. And then again, when I remove the electrode, so the electrode is sitting outside of the tissue, or like the electrode is laying outside of the tissue along top of the cells, and I press that electrode into the cells. You will see a deflection. Now I can pull that electrode back out, and you will see that will deflect back up again. There we go. What you will do then is you will repeat that experiment, pressing the electrode into the tissue and then removing it again in several places. Each time you do that, you will need to record. So as this events are proceeding, you will notice there is a time scale along the bottom of the graph, this time scale along here, these numbers. And when you press that electrode into the tissue, your partner who is working with you will at that moment record that time. So in this case it's 236, 237. Record that time of that event, because you're going to have to go back later and collect that data or transfer it to your data sheet. So once you've finished collecting all the data that you're going to collect today for all the cells, you are going to go back and use then those times that you recorded to identify the important events on your graph. So now we've completed our recording, and what we want to do is go back and then analyze that recording. In order to do that, we're going to load up the analysis settings. This is under this icon right under Tools. When you click on it, it will say Analysis. And now it's loaded up a very similar window. The difference, however, is now it is displaying some numbers that are important to us. Both T1 and T2, which are the two times that these two blue bars correlate to. You're going to use the times then that you recorded on your data sheet as you were proceeding along to position one of these blue bars at that event time. The other important difference is that now we see voltage differences displayed here, V1 minus V2, and what that number comes from is the difference in voltages recorded at these two blue lines. So what I'm going to do is move along through my recording and use those two blue lines to measure voltage differences and automatically display them here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back, scroll back along this timeline until I get to those events that I recorded earlier. So this event was the last one I did, where I had the electrode was outside of the tissue. I pressed it into the tissue. So this is then the potential inside of the cell, and then this is where I pulled it back out again. So in order to retrieve that number, or to derive that number, I can either look along the left side of this scale bar, which is not terribly accurate because it's not well labeled, or I can utilize these two blue bars, which are now available to me in the analysis section. And the way I'm going to do that is just use the cursor to position this first one at the start of the event, so the time right before I press the electrode into the tissue, and center this second blue line at a time when the electrode was inside of the tissue. So time before, time after, this is outside the tissue, inside the tissue or inside the cell, and then the number I will record will be this number right here, V1 minus V2.